right, great. So, all right, Senator, thanks for coming on today, and appreciate you being here at the Unleash Mississippi event, the 3rd annual. And, of course, you're familiar with the 3 major advocacy areas that Empower works on, and one of those is the category we call work, which includes economic policy. And one of those key policies that you were instrumental in getting through the legislature, signed by our governor, was the immediate expensing of business capital investment. Can you explain what that is exactly for the audience, to those who maybe don't spend a lot of time, I should say, preparing tax returns and having to deal with all that wonky stuff?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for having me on today. And yes, Lieutenant Governor Hosemann has worked hard on workforce development and economic development over the last 4 years, and he saw the benefit in this right away. It's fortunately one of the most simple tax changes we've made, because it doesn't necessarily have a negative effect on the state budget, but it allows businesses to take a full expensing of items they would otherwise have to depreciate for up to 20 years. They'd be able to take that in the first year. That would prevent them from doing it in future years, but that can be a big incentive to grow your business. It can make a difference in hiring a new employee, and it doesn't have a long-term negative effect on the state. So one of the most simple bills, and it affects all businesses down to poultry farmers, anybody who is investing in their business, sole proprietors, corporations.
Yeah. So the Empower Mississippi team, were they working with you to some extent, some degree on this as well?
They were, yes, sir. They had been looking at what some other states had looked at, and gave some great policy ideas on wording that we can put in to make it most effective, and so I worked closely with Empower on that.
And in the past, this has been what we call in the accounting world a reconciling item between federal and state tax returns, in that the provision was available for federal tax purposes but not for state. And so you took that deduction on your federal return, you'd have to then add it back on your state return to make it to be compliant with state law.
That's right, and we oftentimes try to mirror federal law to simplify that part of taxes, but in this case it had not been done, and now doing this, hopefully we can make it permanent in Mississippi, and I believe the federal government may phase it out, and we hope that they make it permanent as well.
Totally agree, and it is being phased out right now. It was a major provision of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act signed into law by President Trump in 2017. Unfortunately, it does have some phase-out provisions, and that's just to keep it within the rules so that it could pass with a simple majority in the Senate. And that's being phased out, as are the individual provisions of that law as well. After 2025, we would revert back unless the Congress takes action to the tax laws in effect before that, which is going to turn everything upside down once again, it seems like.
Yes, and looking at where our economy may be in a year, we hope that they make some changes that would promote growth in the economy.
Totally agree. So what's on the horizon in the next session, or perhaps even in the next term, from a finance perspective?
Yes. Well, I think the loaded gun that we're looking at is PERS right now. And,
just talking to the senator about that. Yes. I agree. Yeah, Senator Harkins. Yeah.
I don't see any way that we cannot address PERS. We see new numbers coming out every day. We talk about it at a state level. I think every percentage point that the employer share goes up, it costs the state maybe $53 million. But then it also costs local governments, including not only cities, counties, and then also our colleges and universities.
Yeah.
So in Hattiesburg, every percentage point that the employer portion goes up, it will cost $300,000. So this 2% we're looking at is $600,000. Well, that's 10 or 12 jobs that we could otherwise have.
Yeah, we spoke to Hattiesburg Mayor Toby Barker, who's now the president of the Mississippi Municipal League. That was a couple of weeks ago. And he, of course, expressed serious concerns about the fact that now the employer rate is scheduled to increase. Initially, I believe it was scheduled to increase by 5 percentage points all at once. July, actually it was in October, then they delayed it to July next year, and now it's being phased in over 3 years, I believe, right? 2-2-1, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe that's right. But then with the decrease in the expected return, we could see that continue on, though. I think a lot of people are predicting we end up at 27%, and currently we're at 17%.
Yeah, so let's just make sure our audience knows about that. So we have kind of a stated goal of return on the investment portfolio at PERS to produce income and just grow the assets to cover future benefits and existing benefits from the income perspective. We lowered that from a 7.5% target to 7.
Yes, sir.
Right? So essentially, we're basically saying that we're allowing the portfolio to manage in that way. To some extent, that's because we're looking at needing to invest in less risky assets, which is guards against future problems and interruptions, but produces less return.
That's right, which has a long-term effect. I mean, we see the changes that are primarily causing problems with the retirement system now started in the late 90s, early 2000s. So we see over the course of roughly 20 years how big that gap is spread. And so you change a percentage point now, it doesn't seem like much, but over time it adds up.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And just to be clear, I've talked about it a lot on the show, and I think I accurately represent the sentiments of our state leaders, our legislature. Nobody wants to change the benefits that are currently in place going out to people right now. I mean, is that right?
That's absolutely correct. We have a responsibility to keep that. I mean, people plan their lives based on that retirement, so we have to put that first, and then find a way to salvage raising taxes, right, or converting current appropriations to PERS and neglecting other parts of the state.
Right. And so as I understand it, Senator, the legislature can only increase the employee contribution rate. The PERS board has control over the employer. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. I believe you're right on that.
Yeah, and the board did just that, increase the employer rate. That's how we got the 5%. The employees are already paying, what, 9%? 9%, that's what I thought.
And I think when it started, they were at 2%, and the state was maybe, the employer part was 4 or 5%, so it's continuously gone up.
Once fully implemented, will be north of 31% between employer and employee contributions into the PERS for every dollar of payroll.
That's right, and one of the unfortunate things about that is that when we try to hire people in the state, the cost to the state compared to what the take-home pay is, people are taking home roughly half.
Yeah.
And it's going to go down from there from the cost of the state.
What about insurance, health insurance specifically? I've heard lots of state employees express their concerns about the rise in their part of health insurance premiums. What are you hearing coming into the next year?
So I've heard this as well. I have not dug into the details on that, and I believe we're going to have some upcoming health care sessions, hearings in the Senate. And so I hope to get more information on that, but I've heard the same thing, and I don't know what those potential solutions are as of yet.
Okay. Well, and you're right. Health care, the issue of health care in general is a big one. And I just saw yesterday that Greenwood LaFleur Hospital, which is really in very challenging financial condition, was initially denied their critical access status, something they applied for, which would increase their reimbursements from federal programs of Medicare and Medicaid. They were denied that, and so that's a serious concern. Of course, they're appealing that, and there's another kind of leg in that process. But we've got a lot of hospitals in the state that are struggling.
We do, and it's not just a Mississippi problem. I think it's across the nation.
Absolutely true, yes.
And I think that we face a major health care crisis in many areas, rural hospitals being one of those. But unfortunately, I think the federal government owns this, and there's less and less we can do at the state level to remedy that.
I agree, and that's a great point, is that there's kind of a limit on what state government can do to address this problem. I sort of feel like we need to get a lot of smart people in a room that represent all the factions and all the disciplines and try to just come up with some potential solutions here.
And look at all the options.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Senator, appreciate you coming on. Thanks for your work on the immediate expensing bill. I think it's a big win for the state of Mississippi. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate you being here.